So for chapter 4 for business law, we looked at the Constitution and how it sort of interacts within the business world. So the first question to answer is discuss the relationship between federal and state governments' regulation of commerce, specifically the Commerce Clause. So basically, the Commerce Clause gives Congress the power to regulate commerce, which is buying and selling between foreign nations and between different states and the Indian tribes as well. This clause is important because it helps regulate and prevent different states from making laws and regulations that would prevent or interfere with this buying and selling. There are two types of commerce. There is the interstate commerce, which is state to state, and then there's intra-state commerce, which is interstate, which is like within a specific state. So basically, the Congress can regulate both interstate and intrastate commerce as long as the intrastate commerce substantially affects the interstate commerce. So basically now in today's world, the Commerce Clause authorizes the government to regulate virtually any business enterprise, including online or internet businesses. Within that clause, the federal government can regulate areas or legislate areas that Congress doesn't specifically have power to do so. An example that we have in our book is marijuana. Different states, there are different laws within each state regarding marijuana compared to federal laws regarding marijuana. There is something further than that, sort of, I guess, the dormant Commerce Clause. Basically, this is when state law interferes with federal law. If it violates that, it will be struck down. That's another type of Commerce Clause. So that's basically my understanding for that first one. It's definitely a little tricky to me, but I've been studying it for a bit. So for part B, discuss the fundamental right of freedom of speech. Do we truly have freedom of speech? So freedom of speech is part of the First Amendment right in the United States. Basically, this freedom of speech basically means that you're allowed to say what's on your mind without getting in trouble by the government, in basic terms. There are restrictions to that, however. For example, the government can regulate what businesses can and can't say to the public or their customers. They do this because if they didn't, different things like puffery or exaggerated claims would be said all the time, which would completely affect the customers, and it would be a way for businesses to take advantage of customers. So that's not allowed. So that's one way the government restricts the freedom of speech. Another sort of restriction that we have on the freedom of speech would be you're not allowed to say things that would like discriminatory words. You can't use threatening speech. Or another big thing would be child pornography. That's definitely a big no-no. It is definitely illegal for all of that stuff. So although we do have our I'm saying that like I'm American, there is the First Amendment right, which would be freedom of speech. There are regulations towards that. So next we have what is due process. So basically, due process comes from the Fifth and 14th Amendment. Basically, this says within due process that no person should be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. So basically, like an example would be if someone is trying to sue you, they can't like come to your house one day and just say, hey, you have to be in court the next day. It has to go through due process. So basically, you have to give proper notice. On top of that, fair procedures. So anything that would violate that would be against due process. It's a big system and big process that people have to go through. But that's mainly what that's for. Yeah, so that's basically what that's for. People also must be given an opportunity to be heard. The last section for this content mastery would be what is the concept of equal protection. Basically, with equal protection, basically it means that the government must treat similarly situated individuals or businesses in the same manner. So there are different tests, different scrutiny tests to determine whether the law or action violates the equal protection clause. There is the strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and rational test. Basically, the strict scrutiny inquires involving the exercise of fundamental rights. Intermediate scrutiny inquires involving discrimination based on gender and legitimacy. And then rational basis test inquires involving economic or social welfare. Another thing to note about equal protection is sort of the privacy, personal privacy. This is not necessarily found in the Constitution, but it's big because it's implied in the First, Fifth, and 14th Amendment. So yeah, everyone, similar people must be treated the same way in law. Um, uh, yeah, so that's basically what we've learned for um, uh, chapter 4 for business law.